Hey y'all, I'm Kiara Butler and welcome to Generation Rising, where we discuss hard-hitting topics that our diverse communities face every day. And today's topic is environmental justice. I'd like to welcome Jesus Holguin, artist and activist, and Eugenie Belony, youth activist at the Providence Student Union. Hey y'all.
Hey.
How are you?
We here.
Y'all here, y'all out here in
Thank
these
you for
streets.
having us.
Yes. Thank you for coming.
Of course.
So tell our viewers, who are you and what led you to environmental justice work?
You want to go first?
Sure. Hi y'all. My name is Jesus. I'll give you my pronouns. They, ej, or anything as long as there's not a negative intent. And you know what brought me into environmental justice work is the goal to create holistically safe spaces, specifically for Black and Brown Indigenous young folks,
Yep.
you know, divine masculine and femme folks, and folks who are on the non-binary spectrum. Just really making sure that they have spaces that they feel safe to be, express themselves, and also grow.
What about you?
I am a student. I'm a current senior in high school, and I've been doing this work since, I want to say, 7th grade in middle school. And I've worked with and started, I guess, my journey with Movement Education Outdoors, which I'll talk about a bit later, Sunrise Movement, and working with them over the years and being able to be in these spaces with other youth. And then seeing how, like, again, like, for my community and for my peers, a lot of the times in these spaces we say, remember the empty chair, or remember the empty seat. And it's for those folks, for those youth, those parents, those community members who aren't in spaces like these, who aren't in public forums, who don't have access to that, and seeing how not only does that affect me, but it affects my friends, it affects my cousins and, you know, my younger cousins who are growing up now. So being able to see how I can grow in this space and also impact the others that I work with has really brought me to this new level of understanding environmental justice and how environmental justice is social justice. So,
And Jesus, you said something, holistically safe spaces.
Yes.
Tell me more about that. What does that feel like, look like, taste like?
For me, holistically safe spaces is spaces that basically are acknowledging that we need spaces that are clean. Folks need space. It's all about spaces where you live, work, play. And so you need spaces that are clean from environmental hazards, from toxins, from polluters, from even indoor toxins, like a lot of our schools have mold in it. So making sure that all your spaces where you're learning and growing are clean. You have access to clean air, clean water. Not just clean spaces, but green spaces. So like spaces that are renewable and like access to renewable energy at home. It's also talking about affordable, making sure that like people are not getting kicked out of their neighborhoods because they can no longer afford to live there. It's about policing, right? It's about having a holistically safe space. It's making sure that folks don't feel policed for what they look like, who they love, or how they express themselves. So when I think of holistic safe spaces, that's really the thought that I come with is every piece should have a space where you're like feeling safe, have space to grow, and is like affordable, green, and healthy, right? Like that.
Yeah.
That's really where it comes from.
And I think oftentimes when we think of that paradise, I'm gonna call it a paradise,
Yeah.
right? We think of co-leading and co-creating those spaces. What does that authentically look like to co-lead and co-create a space to make sure that it's environmentally just for marginalized people?
I think it's just, in the terms of co-creating and co-leading, it's not just one person, not just one direct group of people. And especially if we're thinking of the broader aspect, we're thinking of community, we need all hands on deck, right? We need youth to come in, we need our elders to come into this space who have been doing the work, right? Because when we start up new things or new tasks within environmental justice, we're like, I know there's a lot of people who are like, I'm gonna change everything that with climate change, I'm gonna make this right. But there's people who's been doing this work. So in terms of co-creating and co-leading with them, it's, okay, who am I reaching out to? Who are the people who have done this work? How can we make it better? How can we see that progress over time? And then being able to take that step back and see, like, you know, take space, make space. Where am I needed? Where can I put my resources? And also, who needs it as much as I do? Or who's the next person that I can give that on to? And I guess just growing from that space of being, I guess, working together and seeing where everyone lies and where all their strengths and weaknesses are, just for greater good.
Yeah, and you mentioned youth. Oftentimes adults don't want youth in spaces, right? We know it all. So how does that work? Tell me more.
Yeah, so I'll take it from the perspective of being at PSU. So we are a youth-led organization, and when people hear youth-led, they're like, well, yeah, there's youth there, but there's no. Like, it is truly, and as a leadership team co-director, after our adult supporting staff, it's me and my other co-director who are the bosses of PSU. We hold our leadership team, which is made up of 12 Providence Public High School students, including the Met High School. And we work together and we create these campaigns, whether it's working on civics, whether it's working on CNC, which is our Counselors Not Cops campaign to remove SROs from school and replace them with more mental health resources, and how that impacts students, especially after the pandemic. And so in our hiring process, the youth are a part of who is going to be in our space in terms of adults. And one of the questions we ask is, what do you know about adultism? What do you know about that term? Because we don't want people to, I guess, dictate how students or how the youth are holding their meetings, holding what they want to say. We don't want them to feel like this space isn't for them when it is made for them. So when we take that outside of this youth-led space and bring it to the community, it's still the same idea. We want to make sure that youth have that opportunity to be like, oh, I have this idea that maybe my community or maybe my zip code, if you live in 02909 or 02908, maybe we can start something here. How do I help bring my councilmen or women into this conversation? How do I find the people in my community who's already doing that work? Because a lot of times we're scared. We're kind of sheltered away from seeking that knowledge and those resources from elders or from older people in our communities. And it can be a bit like daunting, like to ask those questions to see who has the answers to them. So when we're working together and being able to incorporate youth, elders, like everybody in the mix, it makes the whole process a lot easier.
Yeah, and you're able to finally see the power of your voice, right? You have that platform and you're provided with those resources. So were youth a part of creating the Racial and Environmental Justice Committee?
No, they weren't. The REJC, the Racial and Environmental Justice Committee, I was a part of the co-founding of it alongside the City of Providence, the Environmental Justice League movement. It was founded in like 2016 with community advocates, the City of Providence, Groundworks, Rhode Island, and One Square World. And it was a collaboration to make sure that we were able to bridge community priorities with city policies. So really making sure that the folks who are pushing the city policies had access to like what the communities said their needs and their wants were.
And so what made you all come together? Like, what was the problem that you really saw?
The funny part about like what made us come together was actually the city had this idea around sustainability.
Okay.
And they were like, we want to do this, you know, everyone's doing it, eco-municipalities, and we want to do it here in Rhode Island. And, you know, they got the folks who were doing the environmental justice work. They at least knew enough to like make sure that they were bringing frontline communities. And what they found out really early when they were bringing frontline communities was like, there's a distrust with the city, right? Like there was a distrust with what are you gonna do with our capacity, with our time? We're already like spread thin doing the work. And how is this gonna like not just pacify us, but also get the work that we wanna get done. And so part of that whole initial process, the only reason why REJC came out was because the city agreed to acknowledge the harm that it has caused, right? It agreed to acknowledge the state-sanctioned violence around gentrification, redlining, around policing, around the like enslavement of Black and brown folks, the the taking of like indigenous folks' lands, and just all those different processes, making sure that they were like acknowledging the harm that happened. Because having these conversations around environmental justice, it's hard to have that conversation if folks don't start with that acknowledgement. Because then it's like we're doing history class instead of trying to heal or fix the harm.
Yeah. And you use the terms redlining and gentrification in talking about the environment, and I just want to make sure our viewers are following us. So do you mind defining those for us?
Yeah. So redlining is an outdated system that cities had used in creating maps of their neighborhoods. Really, they were like color coded. Green was like desirable land where you would want to live. Red was undesirable land where you would want to work. And you'll see throughout history the way that they were broken up was really where a lot of the like polluting sites would be. So the red would be where the polluting sites. And that red has like specifically moved in Providence specifically. It used to be on the east side where now Indian Point Park is, and it got moved to the port of Providence. And so at one point the port, Indian Point Park looked like the port. But because that is also next to where the desirable land was, around where colonizers decided to settle and say, like, this is where we're going to call home on the hill, because of war tactics. They then had the power to say, we don't want this in our community and we want a park, and move it to the south side of Providence, where it's predominantly black and brown folks, where the highway, was built on top of like black and brown folks' homes and different things like that. So like that's gentrification, that is redlining, and the gentrification is part of the second part of like redlining, where people can no longer afford to purchase homes or rent homes. And I think that's part of redlining too, that they didn't have access to buy houses, and those maps were set to determine like who got to buy houses in what neighborhoods, whether they got loans or not. And even up until like recently of 2015, you saw that like banks weren't giving black people home loans
at their discretion.
That's right.
And that's happening still now, even in 2022, when it comes to the appraisals and things. Is there anything you would add to that?
I think after adding like the knowledge of like redlining and like the Indian Point Park and Southside, I took what's called a toxic tour with Monica Huertas, and we walked from Ive Street and like the Wicked Inn, like right at the port, and then walked all the way down, Atwell's Ave. And I used to live over there right by where the salt mounds, the big metal scrap yards are, and then it's literally on the second block on New York Ave. And I have asthma, and so while I lived there for the past 7 years in that apartment, my asthma progressively got worse and worse and worse. So, and what's right down the street, the hospital. So my mom's taking me to the hospital constantly. And then we moved to Silver Lake, and now I'm a senior. I haven't used my asthma pump since the end of 6th grade. So 6 years? Wow. And so I wasn't thinking about that. I was like, oh, maybe just, when you're younger, asthma can be a little harder. And I take the toxic tour with Monica, and she's talking to us about all the gas that's in the air on this, that is literally being put into these black and brown communities. And I was living right across from all that, and you literally, when you're driving, you can smell it in the air. And I was like, oh, maybe it's just that, it'll go away. And then we were walking, and she said, you see those big white drums over there? And we were like, yeah, there's about 4 of them. And she said, yeah, those are liquefied natural gas sitting right on our water. There's big ships that are coming in across seas right through our little Providence, right, little Rhode Island. And we have all these big things coming in right next to the hospital, right next to Women and Infants Hospital, right next to Hasbro, in the black and brown communities. And right on that street, I drive by this all the time. And no one, I don't think if no one was to say that you would know, but there's these 2 big metal gate doors. And she was saying that, say there was a big hurricane or there was a big flood, right? So it's a hurricane barrier. And I'm like, oh, okay, that doesn't mean, it doesn't mean anything, but what does that have to do with anything? She said, when they close that, who's gonna get flooded? all of the South Side. Who lives in the South Side? Black and brown communities. And who gets to live nice, freely and dry? The East Side, India Point Park, downtown Providence, College Hill. And so I was like, I lived here half my life and I never understood why the reason that affected me. And that's one of the other reasons why when you ask, like, why did I get into this work? It's because it really did impact me, and seeing that how it's impacting still my friends that live over there. And even Monica, I think, lives over there still. And seeing how she was saying the soil. You can't even plant your own fruits and vegetables in that soil because it's polluted.
Yeah.
The I-95 cutting across that is like, if you know about acid rain, it is the piece of like how, you know, carbon dioxide goes up from the cars and then it just falls right down. And again, that's like state sanctioned violence because the government purposely built I-95 in black and brown communities.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that affects the soil.
So how can we get more people on the toxic tour?
Ask for it, right?
Okay.
I think that's there are a bunch of different toxic tours you can do. Like I've done one, Monica does one, have a friend named Marco who does one, right? Like around even just the Black history in Providence. And so I think asking for one, reaching out, being like, hey, we want to do this. This is something we want to bring either to a lot of the times, you know, schools and teachers would be like, we want to bring our kids on a field trip and we'll do a toxic tour around Providence.
Liquefied natural gas is actually fracked gas, right? So fracking is the process in which they drill a hole into the ground, pump chemicals down to release gas from the rock so that it rises up. So these chemicals stay into the ground and poison folks' drinking water, their land, so they're unable to grow anything on it.
We've gotten CLF, right? They wanted to, CLF is Conservation Law Foundation. They wanted some of their folks to, we wanted folks to experience it, right? And that's part of it is that if you don't go and see what it looks like on a nice hot summer day, you don't know what it smells like, you don't know. And those are the times where people are like, oh my God, like people live here. And it's like, yeah, this is not just live here, but like I go to school here, like I live, work and play here, right? So all of those things.
And I'm not originally from here, so now it's something that I got to look into. Like, I need to go Google Toxic Tour because I need to book one. Can you tell our viewers more, like, what is the Just Providence framework?
The Just Providence framework is one of the pieces that came out of the Racial Environmental Justice Committee. It was probably like 2 to 3 years worth of work of community engagement around our community norms and the ways of working, generational principles, just around the work, like Jimenez principle, the Black Panthers principles, and so many Zapatistas, like so many folks that have come before us, really trying to uplift that work as we were creating our idea of how do we want to do this work and where the work really comes from. Once we got through with that, we was left with like, I want to say like 11 principles, where we were like, this is where our work comes from and how we do it. And when we got to see the end of it, it became a framework. When we put all these things together, it became a framework of like, what does a just Providence look like for a community? What does a just Providence look like for the folks who are working, the folks who are living, the children, like at every step, what does it look like? And yeah, I think I'll leave it there.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to add to that?
I think
you good? Okay. And so what, in building that framework, did you identify any barriers that exist for like marginalized communities or people of color to get involved in environmental justice work?
I think in terms of barriers, it's always, like you said, like we're already spread so thin and like everyone's doing something and there's not enough time, there's not enough resources, and especially when you want to involve the community. Now, who can work at this time? Who's coming in? Where can we get people? Do people have cars or transportation? Where is a central location where we can meet? Can we hold a virtual option to have these community forums or these community meetings with each other? And I think like there's always something that happens, right? We're like, oh, we're good. We have a meeting due this Friday at 3:30, and then 10 people can't make it, right?
Yeah.
Now you're like, damn, okay, can we reschedule? All right, let's reschedule. You know, there's always those things that come up, and it's always hard to work around it, but we find a way because, community helps community, whether we're carpooling, whether like, okay, let's create a virtual option if that's easier, after the pandemic. Let's find a central location. Maybe we can use it as a library if it's a nice day. I know I've held many trainings at Dexter Park or many meetings at Dexter Park and just been outside in the community, where it's an easy enough location for people to come to. So I think barriers are like just the obstacles that we face in life in general. And then also if it comes to a barrier in which like, in policymakers where we're like, damn, we work so hard. Now they're like, stop. Right. And now we're like, well, we can't stop because now we just brought 125 people with this. And we're going to keep it going. So I think coming to those roadblocks, we have to find ways around them, but we always try and find a way around it.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add to that piece around like all the different pieces and trying to align them, and just the obstacles that comes with is like urgency. And one thing at REJC that we always think about is like, whose urgency is it, right? And like, we want to get these things done and we want to make sure everyone's there. How do we do it in a way that like, we know not everyone's going to make it to every meeting, right? And so how do we work with community to make a grassroots space that folks can connect to, be a part of, and bring their own urgency, and not the urgency of like, because yes, the work needs to happen. The work is gonna happen, but we also have to take the time to build the intention into the work that we want to do. And so even with working with the city, with the like Office of Sustainability, a lot of the times it's telling people they need to slow down, because they want to check the box, but they're not. They're like perpetuating the harm. In the like urgency of keeping moving, just to keep moving.
Just to keep moving, just to say you are. So what have you seen as like positive changes that have taken place because of your work? I know there's a list, but if you could think of like one or two.
I think, or at least for me, is bringing more youth into these spaces, right? Especially for like Providence students or Providence youth in general. Like me, it took me, you started in 2016, so it took me like, 4 years to be able to learn more and do the research and find out about toxic tours, be a part of these programs, and bring my friends and bring my coworkers into these spaces. And now it's like, oh, I didn't know we had this. Oh, I just thought that was the Providence River. What's that? Oh, I pass by these things all the time. What's that? So now I'm able to bring youth into these spaces, and youth are like branching out on their own. So I've worked with like the PVD tree plan, and I've started there, and then my friends came in. Now my friends are working with them, and I'm still back here bringing more people in and like, all right, I'm gonna put you here, I'm gonna put you here, I'm gonna put you here. So I think bringing more youth into this space, and not just to be like, oh, I need you to work on this because we need more people, but I need you to understand that this is something that's happening and it affects you, it affects your parents, it affects your siblings, it affects everyone you love, and because this is your community, whether that's your school community, whether that's your house community where you're living. You said we work, play, sleep, eat in these places, and it definitely does impact everything we do and how we move from our day-to-day lives. So bringing youth into these spaces and just educating them and having resources where they can reach out and be able to have these conversations with those folks, if I can't have the conversation with them.
I agree with the awareness, right? Like making sure that folks are aware of their surroundings, the things that you usually make like background characters to know that, oh, those are like real players in our communities. And you are also a real player in the community, and have the ability to have autonomy to say how you want your community to look like. And that just that awareness in itself is really where, for me, where environmental justice live, is that piece of like, you have autonomy to decide what your community looks like. It comes with a big fight because of the obstacles of you not having, all types of power, but like within just your community power, you have the ability to determine what it looks like.
Thank you so much for sharing. How can our viewers get involved, and like, how do we stay in touch with you?
I will say, if you want to connect with REJC, we have info@rejc.com. For me, follow me on my social media. I took the wheel.
Drop the handles. What are your handles?
No, that's I took the wheel.
I took the wheel. Okay.
And
In terms of, I guess, the youth and the environmental justice part, movement education outdoors on all social media platforms.
Okay.
And then pvdstudentunion.org or PVD Student Union on all social media platforms. And then for me personally, you can reach me at astro._Eugenie, which is EUGENIE. Almost forgot how to spell my own name. And then, like you said, just reaching out, doing the research, because we literally have it there. Like, if you search in your zip code, if you search in like some youth environmental justice in Providence or in Woonsocket or Central Falls, Pawtucket, all that information will be there for you. And then just connecting through finding a friend, and then building your relationship through that and getting in the work.
And I just put a sneaky plug for Monica Huertas at the People's Port Authority. If you're looking for those toxic tours that plug in into community, hit her up and she will tell you where you need to be.
All right. Well, guess what, y'all? We have run out of time. It flew by, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, for our viewers, you can watch past episodes anytime on watch.ripbs.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. I would like to thank today's guests, Jesus and Eugenie, for their time and incredible work. And we have started a tradition where you can leave your mark on our board. I'm going to have you all grab some chalk and head on over